Yeah, and it's like this violence, bro.
Yeah.
It's just like constantly violence and constantly professionalism and surviving and all this, and then you're free and you're like a chimp out of a cage. You know, like you're like an angry chimpanzee. And we were in Thailand. The group of guys I was with most often, we were genuinely like good-hearted people, and we like to have fun and just relax and stuff like that. But we were also coming from a place where like once you cross that line, we're happy to cross that line with you.
Yeah. So
Change that right now.
you're gonna send one more sext, you said, before the podcast starts, just to get it out of your system.
One more. The AI phone telling me what I'm gonna do instead of me telling it.
Well, speaking of sexting, sexual things in general, you know, things that get the body going. I'm here with Adam Fleury for the Championship Fighters Weekend in Plattsburgh, New York, at the Ludus Combat Club, Northeastern Primal Life. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Zach. What an honor it is again to talk to you.
Yeah.
Just hang out with you in general, man. Like we've grown a little friendship in all of this, and over the course of years, kind of organically. And
yeah.
That's a cool thing.
Yeah. And for people who haven't listened to the first podcast with Adam, we actually met for a knife fighting seminar a couple years ago, where Adam so kindly demonstrated to me how to defend myself from a knife attack, how to defend myself from basic grappling moves, which I later learned were very foundational in jiu-jitsu, which I actually did my first jiu-jitsu class ever this weekend in Plattsburgh, which we'll get into. But starting a relationship with someone, learning how to not die when you get stabbed, that is a great way to build a friendship and build a foundational, lasting, meaningful journey with someone, to have them show you this is where someone's going to try to stab you and here's how to stop it.
Yeah, true story. I mean, like from that weekend, it was Zach and this other fighter we have here named Jose. We call him Joe because he was born in Colombia, but he's lived in America for a while now. And these are two lasting relationships that have formed and stayed just from that seminar. That was night jiu-jitsu out, and I think he's in Ohio. He's a famous YouTuber. Yeah. And Aaron Giannetti, which is a Steel Mace Flow student of mine. And Aaron asked me, he's like, "Hey, Adam, you're into jiu-jitsu, right?" And that weekend, we basically, I think Knight and Aaron, who owns, what is it, Endeavor Self-Defense or something like that out in Ohio. And they basically teamed up with, I think there was 3 or 4 other gyms in that communique, you know, and we were learning on Zoom. And like, just like Zach said, it was like, we met Zach. "Hey, Zach, welcome." You know, Joe comes in, and like within half an hour, we're like warming up and then like thrusting rubber knives at each other's rib cages and going for inside arm drags. And, you know.
And I was so grateful for that, because that was in the height of COVID too. That was July 2020.
Oh, yeah.
And that was the first gathering that I had done since April, March, when everything shut down. Yeah. And there was no Muay Thai going on, no jiu-jitsu, no in-person fitness classes in New York, which was, you know, wildly ghost town with the shutdown. And then to come up here and be able to get together in a group and try to stab each other, that was something that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun that weekend. I mean, we like literally did, I was trying to remember it just the other day as I was thinking about that experience. And I think we probably did like 4 or 5 hours of instruction. And then we did a couple hours on top of that, just hanging out and jamming in here. So we did like probably 6 hours each day or something like that, you know. That was a lot of exercise, a lot of movement.
I have to ask you, because of your background, you've been in the Army, you've been a contractor. Have you ever had to use the skills that we learned that weekend to stop someone from trying to stab you, attempting to plunge a knife into you? Has that come up in the line of duty?
That's a good question. The funny thing is, I've been shot at, I've been blown up. I've had a lot of different modalities of attack come my way, and I have been stabbed. However, it was from an ex-girlfriend. She was my girlfriend at the time. And I also had a guy try to pull a knife on me in that same bar gig I was telling you about yesterday. And but he didn't do anything with it. And I actually didn't even know I was in danger until after he had left, and I actually kicked him out. And so that was probably the scariest incident where somebody probably could have done me harm, but it was the potentiality of it, because there was actually no aggression. I mean, he was aggressive at first. What happened was like him and a couple other friends, there was two other friends of his that were both male. And, you know, there were some good old backwoods boys type deal, you know, and they were shit-faced drinking at the bar I worked in as a security. And I come back by him and I'm like, hey guys, everybody else is trying to have a good time too, because they were, you know, they were starting to like own the scene, you know what I mean? And like people couldn't get to the bar that they were up against, and they, you know, it was only three of them. And I'm like, hey guys, I was trying to be super nice and like de-escalate the situation. And the one guy with a beard, the guy who eventually pulled out the knife, he was like super, you know, like he was being belligerent then, but he was like, you could tell like he wanted to formulate a problem. And I was like, fuck. You know, like guys, we're just here to have a good time, you know. And his other buddy was doing the mediator sort of situation.
It's
right?
like good cop, bad cop.
Yes.
One was trying to break it up, then the other one was literally trying to kill people.
Exactly. And then so like I talked to him. I'm like, yeah, man, I don't have any issue with you. And I looked at his friend in the face. I'm like, if you keep going, man, I'm going to have to remove you from here. I'm going to ask you to leave. And then if that doesn't work, I'm going to remove you, you know? And then like I left, like try to let that simmer and, you know, the emotion, kind of deregulate there. And, like I was over there a few minutes later. And then at that time, you know, he started getting in my face and shit. Like I just snatched hands on his ass and I was like, let's go. And I started yoking him out of there. Right.
Yeah.
And, he like as soon as they had hands on him, he was like, he fucking put his hands up like that and he started walking with me towards the door. But then as his friends followed him and I went back into the bar room where he was at, and against that bar there was a knife half open right where he was standing at the floor. So he probably had it in his hand and he was starting to open it when I grabbed him, or maybe when he wanted to show me his hand, and he just decided to take a better course.
If it was half open by the bar, he was at least plotting something, took it out, tried to feel it up and down, you know. That was either his time of day to stroke the knife and appreciate it and think, wow, I'm so grateful for this knife, or I'm gonna use this to try to hurt somebody.
Yeah, it was like probably like a 3-inch folded blade, like a locking knife. I have it here too. It's funny. I kept it, sharpened it up. It was dull as fuck.
There you go.
But
you can send him a message and say, hey, you want to meet up and I can give this back to you? He'll probably be like, fuck no.
Yeah, right. That was my wake up call, Zach. Like I worked in that bar for like 3 years, trying to build the money for this place and do what I saw in my mind and saw in my heart that I wanted to do. And I knew eventually, like, I'm the kind of guy that'll work really hard and then just throw the long ball, you know, to get and take the risk and take the chance, you know. And sometimes they are failures, you know. But I was like, that incident happened. I went back home to Kate, whom at the time I lived with in an apartment. It was our first apartment together, and with Kate and Max, and I realized, like, you know, I've had so many scenarios like that where people have risked my life or tried to take my life or put me in jeopardy, that scenario was like, although it was like one of the least violent ones I could speak of, because nothing actually happened other than a little bit of grappling exchange and words and things.
That says a lot, that's the least violent exchange that you can remember in that specific situation, that the situation that strikes you the least aggressive, the least possibility of danger, was a guy who had a knife half unsheathed that was becoming physical. For a lot of people, that would be the story that they tell for the rest of their lives, that what's the most violent encounter you've ever had, and they'd be, oh my God, this one time, you know, I got in a grappling fight with this guy at the bar and he pulled out a knife halfway and then I managed to, you know, push him off. That would be the one thing. But because of the type of work you've done and the duties that you've had, the life that you live, training, you've been around violence much more than other people have.
Yeah, definitely. Like I sought it out, like learning about violence. I saw it like in like, I guess at the end of, I mean, I teach it now, right? I teach, well, I don't teach violence, but I teach how to mitigate violence. And I teach extreme violence of action when the situation calls, right? But like that whole scenario right there, where I went home from the bar, I'm like, man, this is the time. Fuck this. Like, I might not get another one of those scenarios. I saw it as like a message, right? A message from God or whatever, that was like, okay, this is your moment. You have enough money, you know, because there's always those questions like, oh, is now the time? I should do this for another 3 months, and then, you know, and then launch. And then, so I jumped off there, and I think I probably put in my notice in a couple weeks. And that's when I took the dive to open this place up. And yeah, man, it's like just being in from that life and living through that life and being able to pass on the good value, the, like, I don't know, the lessons I've learned and the valuable points and techniques and all that, because I love to teach Muay Thai. I love to teach the stuff in a sport aspect. I think though this, like, self-defense, combatives, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, all this stuff is, there's a real applicable value for everyone's life. And I think people should start there first, because before you're ever going to get in a ring, or before you're ever going to get into a jiu-jitsu competition or whatever like that, you know, you're going to possibly run up against this stuff, or in the very least scenario, you're going to have confidence in a space where everyone else is lacking it, or many people might lack it. And then when things start to get shifty, people can look to you and be like, there's the leader, there's the person who's got their things together, you know.
And there's a lot of quote unquote gurus in the self-defense space. And as a teacher, you have the edge of practicality, having experienced many different situations of violence to different levels, different methods. You have that edge to be able to say to a student, here's something that may be part of the art form that we're practicing that also will be practical in a street fight, something like that. Here's something that you may not want to focus on because this will not be applicable in a street fight. If there's a student whose primary reason for entering a class is self-defense, you have the experience to be able to say which methods may work, which may not work, because you've had people try to grapple you, punch you, shoot you, stab you, like literally the full spectrum of a human's ability to inflict violence on someone. You can say from a personal standpoint that, yeah, this will probably happen if some guy tries to knock you out who's had a few beers, or this scenario is, you don't have to worry about this.
Yeah, it definitely helps, like, having that real world experience. I mean, like, if I was just like all like mind ninja and this stuff, you know how that goes, you know what I mean? Like, you have a scene or a scenario, like, this guy wants to start stuff with me when you're younger and things, and you're like, and you're picturing the fight in your head, the way it's going to go. And then as soon as that thing unfolds, it looks completely different from the world you formed in your head. And like we were talking about with the techniques of grappling, like, like Zach and I were talking last night over dinner and stuff. I had the wonderful opportunity to meet your significant other.
Yes,
so
Julie
cool.
joined us. That was a good time.
That was fun, man. And we were like ninjaing how would this go in a scenario, where, because we spent a lot of time this weekend learning nuances to grappling, learning nuances to grips, and how to control somebody and like pull them around the clinch and deal significant damage, to whatever, whether you're in a contest or you're trying to lay, like Coach said yesterday, Robert Hugas said, send artillery downrange. Send your biggest artillery downrange in a self-defense scenario, because you don't have time, right? You don't have. So Zach and I were talking about, like, would I truly bear hug this guy on the ground? Would I? And you see that in all these YouTube videos, right? Like, sometimes there's an unruly character, but the whole crowd is on the side of, hey, let's get along. And the one guy that might be strong or whatever, he is held down and controlled with jiu-jitsu until police arrive, or until maybe other people can enter the fray.
Yeah.
But then there's other scenarios, right? When it's just anarchy or melee central on a street corner, and one guy like actually gets superior position and takes him down, and now he has top control. And like you said, in that one instance,
and then another guy comes in, soccer kicks you in the head. Like you can have complete control. And again, I'm talking from the perspective of someone who's only taken one jiu-jitsu class, or two now. I took the first two this weekend, and I'm a fan of UFC, so I'm not speaking from a place of experience. I'm speaking from a place of having seen a couple fights unfold in college, and there was one instance where there was a guy on the ground who had a complete clinch, complete control of another guy who was trying to attack him, and he was kind of kneeling towards the ground, and in a ring he would have probably been close to choking that dude out. He would have won that fight. But then another guy out of nowhere, who I assume was the friend of the guy he had in the clinch, came out of nowhere and soccer kicked him in the back of the neck. And I don't know what happened in the moments after that, because we kind of all went out there, but that got me thinking, you know, you can have someone in complete control, and if you are outside a gym setting, that could actually be a detriment to you if there are other people involved. Someone steps in, friends step in, you know, it's kind of, there's no right answer, which is what I appreciate about the way that you approach it, because again, there's a lot of videos out there that'll show you step 1, grab the wrist, step 2, break the wrist away, step 3, take the back. And there's so many different variables in every scenario that you can't just have one specific bullet pointed way of attack in your head. Because what if when you break the wrist, he picks up a pipe from the ground, and like then you have to worry about a weapon in his hand. It's not just a gun and all this stuff. And Aaron Giannetti went over this too when we were doing Night Defense, that don't take this as gospel. Don't take this as we're doing this sequence, so it has to be this way. Do whatever fucking works. You know, when you're grappling with someone to take away a knife in class, you're not trying to beat them to death with the other hand. You're just trying to do drills. So it's like whatever works. If you survive a scenario without being maimed or killed, then that was the right way to do that. Yeah, it worked.
Yeah, I mean that's it. It's like you train techniques, right? And there's so many techniques that there's nobody on earth that knows all the techniques, all the ways. You know, it's like you kind of pick an identity, or you know, like I'm fast and mobile, so I'll use some of these, or I'm very flexible, so I'll use some of this, right? But like you basically just form your identity, or you form like kind of a signature, a style based on what you want to study and what you want to do and where your strengths are, maybe fortifying some weaknesses and stuff like that. And you kind of have to enter that situation with an open mind, and then hopefully you see through repetition, like when you grab that wrist and all of a sudden you just do something with it, and you're like, wow, I didn't even think about that because I spent the gym hours on that. But that's not to say that as soon as that grip changes, the whole thing change. You know what I mean? You probably saw that this weekend. You put your hand here and all of a sudden it leaves. We just left a whole section of technique and changed the script to a whole different game. You know, so it's impossible to have every situation like formulated and like, I'm just going to do this. It's you kind of got to just flow. Like we were talking about, let's just flow with the thing and have the open mindset, and also not get tunnel vision. So there's so many variables, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's wild, you know, and remember to breathe. You know? And
when we were in class the second time, when we're changing guard and I'm starting on bottom and then you're trying to flip me, and then when you're just submitting me within 10 seconds every time, there is an enjoyment that I can get out of that from learning or trying to stop an attack and being in some sort of flow state. That obviously it is not going to work when you're in a street fight scenario. There's no room for enjoying flowing with an opponent and be like, I might let this last a little bit longer because I'm interested in this position. Like what he's doing right now is opening up a window to something I've never thought about. Like, I've never thought about what happens if I'm in a Kimura and a guy has a knife to my throat. Like, let me just stay in this position for 10 seconds longer, try to figure a way out of it. It's like, no, I got to fucking like do whatever I have to do to get out of there. So, which is why class is so great, because you can be in a position and drill it over and over again in a safe environment with a good partner, and you can both raise each other up. Whereas in a street fight scenario, you're trying to end that situation as quickly and violently as possible, even if that situation is you running. Like, that's as violent as you had to get.
And that's a great point, Zach. Like, running, like, space is, you know, the best option. You know what I mean? Like, even if you have to inflict like extreme violence at the moment you need to inflict it, and then just creating space immediately, even though you're not sure. I'm not sure if he's down. I don't know if he's going to get up in 5 seconds or 50 minutes. Yeah. But you just start separating, start making that space, because to get pulled into that, you know, I guess there's commonalities that we could put over into the competitive space too, right? Like, for instance, you and I are sparring it up in here, right? And all of a sudden you tag me, boom, with that sharp jab of yours. But you've been trying to goad me into a little telephone booth war with you, right? Yeah. Like, and you pop me again, you know, and like, okay, Adam, don't follow him into it. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Still stay on the outside, set your game, right? So it's like having that awareness also in the street aspect or the self-defense aspect, be like, okay, I really do want to like punish this dude for the wrongdoing of all these people, but that might not be the course right now, you know?
Yeah. So if you think of the attitudes and the body language of the people that have tried to inflict violence on you, whether it's the ex-girlfriend or the guy at the bar, someone who's, let's take trained people out of it for a second. Sure. Is there some way or some sort of through line to people who are untrained in violence, something like Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, and are trying to inflict damage on you? Is there something that you can pick up on, like, this guy looks or feels like he's about to get violent? Is there a calm before the storm? Is there anything with eye contact, the speaking patterns, something where you get a vibe of this guy or this girl? I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm getting a sensation based on my experience that this person has a higher percentage of getting violent than the other people around them.
That's a really good question. Like, and it actually delves, I'm going to go like two different routes with this. One route is like, one thing that I've seen, and I'm no different. Like, I had a cagey and kind of dicey background too. I come from a very traumatic past. Like, in my childhood, I had a bunch of traumas done to me, and also, just basically seeking it out, because I guess that's what I knew, right? That's now in hindsight, that's the journey, right? Like, I always wanted to be a soldier, even from like a very small child. So there's something in there, an innate warrior within me that I knew about. But then, like, trauma felt more like home to me than being in it like this right now, where there's no risk, we're nice and moderate right here, So I kept seeking that out through my 20s and even into my 30s, and then so looking back on it now, like, I think a lot of that, it's just stems from trauma, even if it's a person's trauma that they're dealing with in that day, right? Like, I just got up, my girlfriend or significant other or whatever was yelling at me, my kids are all sick, now fuck, I don't know how to handle it. Plus I have all these demons that I'm battling with. I'm going to go to the bar at 3 p.m. and start getting drunk. And so it's a buildup of trauma, and you kind of see, well, what is trauma? It's a lower brain function. It's a lower, like the lizard brain, and dealing with that. And, it takes higher function to deal with that positively and progressively. So usually you hear somebody's speech start to rail off, like expletives will come in, maybe shaking or rewording things, and stuff like that. So it's you see that person take almost the lower road. versus trying to figure it out, breathing.
So it's like the lizard brain kicks in right before they're violent.
Yeah. Unless they're like a true sociopath. And I've met a couple of those. And those are worrisome because like they're breathing, they're conscious, they're calm, and they still want to like, they don't resonate with you, you know, or whatever's going on. And that's a different breed.
Could that level of maintaining a normal breath and normal heart rate, could that come from training too?
Yes.
Or do you always, so you'll get a different, because you've trained more, your heart rate will stay more intact during a violent session.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of the first things I teach to the guys and girls that come in, men and women, although some girls and young boys do come here and train. But I teach that to all of them because we all have, no matter what your background is, you've dealt with trauma. And whether it's something you've even seen with your eyes and you weren't necessarily involved with, but you know, when you see stuff that shocks you to the core, it's no different, I don't think. You know, it's maybe you didn't have the tactile responses or something, but it's still in there. So people will come in here stressed and stuff, and I'll go through breathing protocols, right? Like we did breath of fire this weekend, and that's fun, but that escalates you, right? But I'll teach them more like the box breathing or Wim Hof for recovery and stuff like that. So I believe like even if you're in that traumatic state as that person who's going to instill violence in someone else, maybe, and you don't want to, right? You're just days going shitty and you're kind of pushed to the brink. If you know breath techniques, at least you can pull yourself back from that edge, have a calm or a sound mind and be like, you want to know what? I need to get out of here. This place is not good for me. This place is causing the problem, right? The energies I'm in. And so I believe definitely everyone, even from like, okay, I don't have time, I don't have the money, maybe you don't even have any desire whatsoever to ever learn how to throw a punch or learn how to escape somebody from on top of you or something. If you just learned breath, like as soon as boom, boom, that initial catalyst drops, you're breathing and you're like, oh, I see an exit, instead of being the person that's like running directly at the threat, you know, like a chicken with its head. So it all starts with breath. It all starts with like having a sound mind, building from the center and then out, you know?
Yeah. So someone who is untrained and not a sociopath, there'll be some sort of breathing. You could tell there's a tenseness happening about them physically.
You'll see their angry breath.
Angry breath.
Angry breath, it exists right here. So you'll see just this going.
So
right
deep,
here.
deep
Just
chest breathing, deep throat breathing.
Instead of here.
Even doing that right now, I can feel how that tenses me up. It makes me think of when I've had anxiety attacks in the past where I forget that my stomach can, to do the belly breathing. Even my tongue starts to touch the top of my throat. Like it makes my throat feel like it's closing up versus the letting my stomach fill up.
And then just... Yeah. And isn't it amazing just one or two of those sometimes when you're at a place of anxiety or escalation and you're like one or two of those and you're just like in a whole new place, you know, whole new place to make different decisions, right? Yeah. And all of a sudden your world isn't burning as much, right? Or whatever. And like that energy, that's the other thing I wanted to talk about there. There's a duality here, not a duality, but there's a twofold place I'll talk about here. One's in combat, and I'll save that one for the second part. Yeah. And the first is I'll go to the same bar, okay? And in that bar, we had a couple like low down slobber knocker, just everybody just goes hog. Like a few people started it, and then for whatever reason on that occasion, everybody just like fuck it. This is where we're at, and this is what we're doing tonight.
It's like a food fight with grown men. And just fucking like someone throws the tomato, it splatters, and then everyone gets in. And lots of women.
Lots of women in flying purses. Actually, the one who instilled the most violence on me was a woman with a purse. She did the most damage.
There you go.
Yeah, even though I got
watch the purse hand.
Yeah, I got hit solid twice too by some decent punches, but it you know, the chin held up, and those purses were way worse because they're like, you know, there's like things in there and they're using it like a bolo.
Oh yeah,
and they're whipping it.
I mean,
and then the zippers are hitting you.
I mean, with all the makeup and shit that women carry in their purse, it's basically like a designer brick. I've seen women that are carrying these big stuff. Yeah, literally, it's a brick that says Gucci or Dior on it. So getting hit with one of those in the face, especially if there's a makeup pen or like a nail clip or something, like whatever the fuck is in there, and that's sticking out of the zipper, and then it becomes like a spiked purse, you know.
It's like just shrapnel flies out of it too, you know. It's just like, it's
when
a shit show.
For my apocalypse get out bag, I'm definitely gonna have a purse stuffed with makeup with some spikes sticking out.
There you go. Maybe a couple mirrors in there that can shatter into glass shards.
100%.
So yeah, the interesting thing about those, and they were all the same energy I'm gonna speak of, and there was like, of course, there's always maybe not always, but in the times that I've understood, if you're paying attention, there's always a few clues, or there's always a string of events that are leading to it. And the more you pay attention, the more you breathe, the more that you're aware, you know, of your surroundings and the situational awareness. And that's something you can drill on your own and do little drills and just fun games, right? Like I Spy. I Spy is like a kid's game of situational awareness, you know what I mean? And it grows from there. So I did notice there was a chain of events, but those events were very small, and those events were so small that if you didn't pay attention, everyone would miss it. But what you can't miss, and I think whether you breathe or not, we all have this ability, but there's an energy, and it feels like you can feel like a pin drop as right before it happens. And that energy is something you can really pick up on, and you'll notice other people start getting anxiety, but they don't know why. And the first time I ever experienced that was in combat. And like, it was, I was still in the Army, and it was one of the worst firefights we had. We were pinned down on a river for like 3 or 4 hours as a recon platoon. So a very small platoon of men, 17, I think we had that day. And we were out on these boats on like a riverine mission, you know, reconnaissancing and scouting sites for medevacs, because a river is like a linear danger area, but it's also like a terrain feature that you can't cross without special equipment, right? And things like that. So we were going up and down the Euphrates River, marking these spots. Now, you can't travel up and down a line for too long until
someone sees you there.
All the Indians see you. You know. So we're on that line, and we eventually, you know, a couple hours in, got hammered. And the weird thing was, though, Zach, that was the first time I'd ever really picked up on that energy, and it was the morning of. So it wasn't actually right before. It was that morning of. We're all mission prepping and getting our stuff and our gear together, and we had like these ladders, and as the engineers had to blow this giant hole out of the side of the river and like concrete it so we're safe from gunfire just getting in the boats and all that, you know. So we're doing that and prepping and getting down in the boats and stuff. And there was a couple of us that were all buddies, and we looked at each other like, hey, is something different about today? And they're like, yeah. And then my buddy Mike looks over at me, oh, we're gonna fucking get it today. And like there was that energy in the air, and we just all knew it, you know. And that was not our first time in contact. That was not our first rodeo. But we all knew something was amiss, and then we're like, "Yeah, this might not be a good mission to do." And that all starts. And
so
then,
I was gonna say, the morning of, you don't know anything that's gonna happen. Firefight hasn't started yet; it's still hours away. The guys who ended up fighting and firing on you, maybe they were still in the planning stages too. They knew what they were gonna try to do, but they hadn't started mobilizing yet. I wonder if there is some sort of measurable energy that we don't have the technology to see right now. But like, if you get in a violent state, or any state, violent state, happy state, some sort of aura that feeds off of you that we can pick up on emotionally, but we have nothing to pick up on it and say, you know, this person's at 2.5 out of 10 aggression, violence right now based on their aura.
Right.
I wonder if there's a large group of people, like in a firefight, if you have 50 guys that are planning to be extremely violent later that day. I don't know how many people were on the other side, But
it was a very complex attack. It was the most complex attack I had experienced up until that point. And that was Easter of 2004. It was Easter Day of 2004. And I'd been in country since September of 03, the beginning of September of 03. And yeah, they were staging like these bongo trucks, which are these big stake bed, flatbed truck type things.
Yeah.
And they had multiple of them full of men, and they were bounding with them because they knew we were on a river. So they had set, and as soon as that person kicked off the ambush and was finished with it, they had 2 or 3 more up the river, and then they would leapfrog up the chain, and they were hammering that. But you said something important there, like 50 guys. I don't know how many people it was. It was a lot. We called in the Air Force eventually, and that solved some problems that we were like initially dealing with. And plus there was some locals that came out and joined the fray. So it was interesting because, like you said, 50 guys. If there was 50 guys, if there was 100 guys, then have you ever, and I don't know who put the study out, but it's a recent study. It's a modern study. And they said something like 1% of a population. So 1,000 and 100,000, right? If you get those 1,000 to meditate and pray or think positive mentality outside of, like, close to a group of a body of 100,000, you can actually change the you can kind of change the makeup of what those people feel in their day, right? So I believe that there is definitely something. There's definitely been science and research done on morphic resonance as well, like where places hold energy, like a gulag, or a place in Cambodia. Like I've been to Tol Slang in Cambodia, which is a torture camp that the Khmer Rouge used to use. So I've been there 3 or 4 times, you know, and the hallways are littered with blood, and there's bones out in the courtyard and shit. And there's definitely something like, I know that it's, you have the knowledge and you're going into this place, but I'm telling you, you can feel it. And just like those men were preparing for battle that morning, and is it a meditation? No, but they're going through their lists. They're going through their process, you know, their PCI and their gear. They're doing all this stuff, and their intention is to go out and destroy. And we picked up on that in the proximity, you know what I mean? And the same thing could be said for that bar room. Now the bar room happened like quick, like a tinderbox. Like I was like, oh, and I picked up on a couple things, but those couple things are every night, right? Like every night there's something that could go wrong, you know, but then all of a sudden it was just quiet, and you saw people kind of commotioning around, dude. And then like literally seconds later, that guy comes over and just whoom, hit somebody, you know.
There has to be some sort of energy that gets amplified when you have a bunch of people in a singular place with a common motivation. There has to be something that starts to leak off of you that can be picked up by other people. And we all, you know, I have nothing to prove this, no evidence, but, you know, just based on past experiences, it seems like we have some sort of built-in emotional antenna that's not just for feeling out how people feel right in front of you. We all have body language, sense eye contact, the way that people speak around you, move around you. We can feed off of that. But if someone is not in your visual perception, if you can't see them, and maybe they're a mile away from you, but it's a lot of people and they're all feeling the same way, you may be able to pick up on some sort of lightness or darkness, and you just, you know, you walk towards somewhere and you just feel like something something feels like it's awry. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing that's about to happen, but something's happening that's off, and it's gonna fuck up the equilibrium. And I don't know exactly what it is, but it's gonna happen. I feel like there has to be something within us that can sense large groups of people planning something, and on the positive end too. I've been to a few music festivals. I know that there's something when I'm walking up to an entire parks full of 40,000 people that are all gathered you know, sure, there's drinking, there's drugs, but there's also music.
Yep.
There's people that are just generally happy. And I've definitely had the experience of walking towards somewhere completely sober and feeling like I feel an energy emanating because there's 40,000 people in the center of Chicago and there's music blasting, and, you know, you could barely hear the music, but you just got off the train and you're like, fuck, like something's about to happen. If that feeling can happen, then something could also happen on the opposite end with violence and terror. That if there were 40,000 people planning a terrorist attack in the middle of Chicago, like I would have felt something completely different. I wouldn't have known exactly what would have been happening, obviously, but like there would have been some sort of oppositional energy where I'm like, what the like I don't want to go. I'm not being pulled by this force. I'm like being told to stay away. Yeah,
I completely understand, and I actually look into the positive side of that these days because I live an awesome life these days. I love my life, and you know I have to now seek the stressors. Like, you know, like we built this weekend around your trip up, and you know, so it puts us in this voluntary stress response. And that's a positive thing, right? Because just like the festival, we're all entering it together and be like, okay, I'm coming in this to hang out with my guys and do this stuff together. That's all going to be hard, and we're all going to be there and doing it together, right? And that's a positive thing. And then you feel the energy for days and weeks after, right? That springboards you in your progress, right? Because you've learned lessons, you've done these things, but you also soaked up the energy, the positive energy. But I mean, I'm soaking up your positive energy, and maybe you haven't even discussed with me all the ways that it's been positive, but you're just emoting them, right?
Yeah.
And so I definitely love to study the positive side because it does reveal a lot about, because it's all just energy, right? And you know, and you talked about drugs, and like I think that's a easy way for people to cop out of studying or analyzing that in a good sense, because it's like, oh, it's not the energy, it's just everybody coming out there to do drugs, and but that's exactly what anxiety is too. You can have a stone cold sober person who's not breathing right, and their chemistry changes through the breath, right? So it's all it is just being available or closed off, and then and analyzing everything that's going on, you know, with the energies and the drugs that are exogenous and endogenous, you know. So all of it,
and depending on what state of mind the person is in, what sort of traumas they've been through, they might be in a state where the emotional scar tissue is so closed that you can't even speak about an experience without some sort of opener in your system. I know there are a lot of guys who have served that have PTSD that have reported really good effects with taking MDMA or psychedelics, where it's not, you're not taking it to go to a festival. You're taking it to get into a state with a trained professional who is talking to you. And then, you know, all of a sudden you feel like you can talk about things that you couldn't in a state where that particular substance wasn't in your system. But chemical, that's the way that I've looked at it more recently. I read a book called Drug Use for Adults by Dr. Carl Hart. He's a neuroscientist at Columbia in New York, and he for decades has given all different types of people and all different types of drugs to people from all backgrounds in a laboratory setting. And they're all, you know, obviously willing people, voluntary part of studies. Some people have PTSD. Some people are participating in the study, all different reasons. And the way he talks about drug use, it's almost as like you're trying to pierce the veil to live a fulfilling life and open a slice of reality that you can operate in. And that's different for everyone. So some people may need a certain drug and, you know, they take it 3 times, something like a psychedelic, and that completely changes the way that they open up and experience the world combined with therapy. Other people may need something more regular. It's a way to experience, it's a way to alter your experience in a way that when it's done right makes you have long-term fulfillment. Not makes you have long-term fulfillment, but like opens a pathway.
Yeah.
So I've started to think more about it like that, because I used to have more of a bias towards like, if this person touched this drug, like they're unreliable.
Yep.
Like, no, only low lifes would ever try this drug, or like these are like the good drugs, these are the bad drugs. Ascribing moral precepts to chemicals that are not moral, they're amoral substances. So just what you were saying called to mind his book and the things that I've been reading about that, process of kind of breaking free of the preconceived notions, not just with drugs, but just different types of behavior, the way that people approach life, that as long as you're being kind and being a good, trying, doing what you love to do, being kind, paying attention, giving off that energy, then that's all you can really ask from people.
And have like a building intention, have a healing intention, or a progressive moving forward intention. Like, and we talked about it already in fighting. It's not cookie cutter, right? There's no, okay, Zach, if a guy grabs you like this, just do this, and then you'll never have a problem again. It's the same thing with trauma. I wouldn't be able to talk about these experiences, like my past in war or in contracting or any of that, really, if I hadn't healed from those. Maybe not completely. It's still, you notice when I tell stories about Iraq and Afghanistan or wherever it's been, even Thailand, those stories I was telling you last night, like it elicits a hyper response, because it puts me right back in that energy, and I'm trying to find the words for like getting after it, like
100%.
So there is no cookie cutter thing. I've had friends that healed with ayahuasca, and I've had a very positive experience on DMT myself, and I've never done it again. But it was very positive and transformative.
So it was that one time you did it, and then for whatever reason, that experience allowed you to walk a different path, a more fulfilling path after that moment. Yeah,
and I can't really put it completely into. I can't really put it at all in a sensible English form. Yeah, but I can tell you certain like key points and things that I had experienced. I know that even I had physiological changes happen to me during it, and I think too, it opens, some of them open doorways for people that are so locked. I don't know, people have different backgrounds, right? And I know some people come from like a very orderly background where everything's figured out and squared away, which is complete horseshit in my opinion. Because if you're with people who just think they have everything figured out and like they just haven't gone far enough. Yeah. Because I'm telling you right now, like there's more than meets the eye to this world. I've had very mystical experiences stone cold sober.
Yeah, and I've been that person. You feel like Superman. You graduate from college, you think you have the world figured out, and I'm like, I'm 24 years old and I have everything figured out. Why is everyone freaking out? And then reality bashes down your door, and you find out that if you don't do the work to focus yourself and get discipline and treat other people kindly along the way, you're just going to go through life, kind of being a little bitch and lashing out at other people.
Yeah, because if you have everything figured out, right, then what else is there to do? Yeah. Right? Like, just go do the right thing. Just go, go figure it out, instead of like constantly like, oh, wow, like, I thought I had this figured out, and then you just blew my mind, and now I have to analyze things, and it sets you in this whole cascade of of like life journey, like.
Sometimes I wonder, when you have people that are in positions of power, like a horrible politician, for example, someone that gets into politics for the wrong reasons, and they don't vote based on what they think is right or will be the best outcome for most people, or pass legislation according to that belief. They have all these other fillers coming into them, whether it's corporate money or lust for power, whatever it is. I wonder how much the feeling of having it figured out has to do with that type of person in that situation, where, because if you do have life figured out, in a sense, you are your own God. Like there's nothing left to learn. Yep. And so you can either just chill in that state.
Yeah.
But that's not human nature. Then you want people to play with and be like, I wonder what happens if like we attack this country or whatever, or like we, you know, I get this legislation passed, or just like being a person and having an ability to push a button and change the lives of thousands of people. Even if you're a great person, that can induce a power trip for sure, like an incredible power trip. So I wonder how much that feeling of everything is the way that I think it is, and you know, you start to morph the world towards your own concept of what you think reality is. So you're not even taking in information clearly anymore. It's being distorted through the filter that you've created. So it's all confirmation bias. Yeah. Like what creates the type of person who can get to that point where they're just like, you see them, you're like, how the fuck did you get to this level? Yep. Whether it's a politician or like whoever, just someone that has a lot of power over people.
It's like no checks and balances, right?
Yeah.
In that person's life past a certain spot. Oh, dude, can I run and hit the...
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Power of editing. 100%.
Yeah. I wake up in the morning, I pound like 32 ounces of water.
Yeah.
Right out the gate. And then I, more often than not, go to the coffee.
That's the way to do it. I like putting the teaspoon of Himalayan salt in the protein shaker, fill it up with water.
Yes. Yeah, maybe a little. Sometimes I'll do apple cider vinegar in the water too, or I'll just do a separate shot.
Yes.
Which the separate shot is like a good hard body kick.
Yeah.
After a night where you were not responsible with your refined carbohydrate intake.
Yes. So it's speaking of the dehydration versus the hydration. I wonder how many people, like politicians that are bad actors, anyone that's a bad actor, I wonder how many people that are doing terrible shit in the world are just dehydrated.
Right?
Like if before you could push the red button and launch a nuke at a country, you gave that leader mushrooms, a protein shaker with Himalayan salt, and you gave them a breath work. Just said, you know, for 5 minutes we're going to do some breath work. If that doesn't work, you start with the shaker, just get them hydrated, breath work, and then if that doesn't work, you dose them with mushrooms.
Yeah, and if that doesn't work, then you go sign them up to a 1 hour Robert Hugas Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class where they go train with a 1-year white belt and get smashed to pieces.
Yes.
And then they're like, oh wait, I'm not the strongest person I've ever known. I'm not.
And you don't have the energy to do bad shit.
There you go.
After yesterday doing Steel Mace Flow, the cold plunge, Muay Thai, and jiu-jitsu, I can't, I'm lying in bed and it's sapped of energy in a great way where I feel, like I did a lot of cool shit today and a lot of good shit for my body. You don't even have the energy. If I were to then plan out, you know, what I was going to do to disrupt someone else's day, I would have to say, I'm going to leave this for tomorrow. Mentally and physically, I can't ruin someone's day today. You know, tomorrow is a different day, but right now I'm just like enjoying the Zen state.
You're going to sleep on it.
Exactly.
It's
sleep
like
on it.
Necessary.
Yeah. But I wonder how, you know, how many people that are out in the world causing violence and wreaking havoc upon the lives of other people, especially people that are in positions of power, because you're able to leverage your actions much more than the average person. You know, you flick one finger and you can kill 1,000 people. You have to do a lot of work as the average person to even kill one person. Like that, you can't be tired and do that. You have to so for those people who are in those positions of power, I wonder how much of that could be solved by pressing pause in some way, even if it wasn't mushrooms. Like even if you just took 10 deep breaths, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to go through with this? Or is there another way that would still get the point across and leave the world in a less destroyed place? Yeah,
you brought an interesting point up there. It's like all this stuff can be scaled, right? Like the guy in the bar who's about to make the bad decision, right? Because maybe he isn't hydrated and he doesn't know how to breathe, right? And he is an asshole or whatever, right? If that guy runs a country, boy, we got issues, right? And like that's the thing. Like, you know, I've heard Russell Brand speak on this, and he's mentioned like he believes like we should live in smaller communities, right? Like a conglomerate of small, like associated communities, but each community doing its own thing, you know? And I think, you know, it just, to me, that seems like it makes sense, you know what I mean? Like, so I'm told, back during like the Articles of Confederation days in the early America, right? It was much more loosely formulated, and really the only thing the federal government would come together for is national defense, or like to kind of like squash an uprising or something like that. And it seems like we always scale up in history. That just never turned out. Like when's the most peaceful, prosperous society that's ever lived, where it's like, we don't really read about that. We read about the war that changed, and then it just built up to the next war, and then built up. The peace is really after everything's destroyed. And then people are like, fuck war. I've been doing that for like 20 years. Yeah. I just want to live in peace. And then the males all grow up and then go fight again. You know, so like, what is that? What is that strive to constantly make everything gigantic?
Yeah.
And unmanageable, because power truly corrupts. Like absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Have you read the book Civilized to Death by Chris Ryan? He's also the same guy that wrote Sex at Dawn.
Yeah,
that was his first.
That's his big
kind of opening into the explosion into the public eye as an author was Sex at Dawn. And I was actually lucky enough to have him on the podcast a few months ago, and when we spoke about Sex at Dawn and his latest book, Civilized to Death. And in that book, he talks about how we have this conception that humans at our core, if you let us devolve to our quote unquote natural state, whatever that is a violent, malintended being. And for a long time, that has driven progress and science off of those conclusions of we are bad at our core, and therefore progression is good, because that takes us away from our most natural state of just, you know, cavemen human beings. But according to him and the research that he's done, and he cites all of this in the book, from studying the actual closest ancestors to humans, which are bonobos, slightly closer than apes, they are very communal, physically, sexually, emotionally. And there's a lot of evidence that shows how human beings sharing a large part of our DNA with someone like the bonobo, 98.5% or more, something like that, ridiculous. We assume that we came from apes, which are more violent, much more homicidal, much more aggressive. And bonobos actually, you know, they live in states where they can get along, and being in a community is not the natural devolved state of someone like an early human. If we're basing it more off of bonobos, is not this aggressive, you know, I see someone who is you know, maybe they have a resource that I want, I'm just gonna bop them over a head with a rock and kill them. Like, no, there's actually an incentive to share things, because that builds trust, and that's what you want in a community. And you start to learn each other, you start to learn how someone else behaves, you start to form these groups, and you learn that you don't want to act violent, you don't want to cause unnecessary commotion, because that is bad for you and also bad for the group. And now if there's someone that acts out, what's interesting is that bonobos will actually, before they engage in violence, they'll actually tease someone. Like they'll do their own version of talking shit, where you know, someone takes your food and, you know, they might roughhouse play around. Like if someone's going through your stuff in the fridge and they're eating what you prepared for lunch, before you punch them in the face, you'll probably be like, hey dude, come on, like don't be a piece of shit, like, you know, just like ribbing them, talking to them verbally. That type of behavior is something that can keep the group together without starting a violent bar fight, that version amongst bonobos, something like that.
It's like they have more tiers of escalation before it turns to outright. Yeah. Just this is the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so we've just assumed that human beings have gone from this naturally violent state, and then since the dawn of time, we've just been progressing further from that natural state. And the reason why, you know, things are good now is because we're so far away from that. Chris Ryan argues that no, he's not against the advancement of technology, but technology should be leveraged on the basis that we actually have the ability to be in a natural state and come together and live in communities. And we're not just on the edge teetering of killing each other. And ironically, we are in that state now because we have things like nuclear weapons and things that can blow the planet up, but we're not from this, you know, beast of havoc that a lot of scientists and a lot of people claim that we are, and they formulate lines of thinking based off of that fundamental premise, which is fractured and untrue.
Yeah, that's really where it starts, right? Is understanding or where your belief system is, what the human being is, or what we are. And I share a sentiment in that. I think technology shouldn't be this unending, like, it seems like capitalist gain to me. You know, every quarter you need to have profit gain. Yeah, you got to have growth, right? Which, is that truly sustainable at the end? Is you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's not an anti-capitalist rant by any means, right? But like, if there's no room for growth, are we going to force that into a market we shouldn't be in, right? Or so in the human, I believe, like, when left to our own devices, like, so me just with my unfettered ambition, right? That's a route to violence and that warlike behavior. But that's why I think we all need to have an ingrained purpose or a higher calling. And whatever that higher calling is for you, if it's to care for children, it's whatever you came here to do, right? And that takes sometimes a lifetime to figure out. Yeah. But it's like, it is that higher calling. It's when you don't have that purpose, when you don't have that, then you start to just basically become prey to other people's energies or the energy that enters you. Because we've all had terrible ideas that come into our brain. Like, that's not me. Yeah. That's not my thought. Right. So what is that? You know, what is that? You know, is that's like whatever the evil is, whatever the dark side to the positive, to the light that we are, you know? And if you don't constantly have a purpose or something higher that's set in a moral landscape, right? I want to be the best coach I can be, and put that among a moral construct too, right? Like, a coach doesn't abuse the students, a coach doesn't sit here and try to take advantage of people when he sees an opportunity, right? And these things, so that keeps me away from those like kind of deleterious thoughts and like those patterns of violence. And you know, you see people who think they have it all figured out. And those often are the people that it's like, get my way or the highway, get on my team or I'll smash you, you know? Yeah. And there's a lot of people in business like that too, right? And it's like, man, you're kind of like emulating strategic and warlike processes, but you're like a real estate agent. You know what I mean? Like, do you really want to come smash me, bro? Because then, you know, it's like, it's weird.
I think about that a lot, that competitive battle state mindset. And you know, for me personally, I don't like using war analogies with sports, my past experiences, because people, you know, like going to battle against another team, I don't know what it's like to actually be in a battle. And I know those analogies are out there, but I want to frame it more through the lens of competition. And having gone through 17, 18 years in that competitive athlete mindset of baseball, there's a lot of value in competing against other people in a zero-sum situation, because those situations do arise. But you also, I'll speak personally, I also have to learn to turn that switch off, where I know it's not a zero-sum game. Something like starting a podcast, starting a business, where I'm not necessarily competing against other podcasts. The only person I'm competing against, the only entity I'm competing against, is to be better than the podcaster I was last week, last episode, yesterday, whenever that was, that past state of me. I want to compete to be better than that person. And we can follow that through with the ultimate growth mindset with capitalism, because that normally accounts for only external growth. There's no, you won't find in an economic textbook, how are you growing internally as a business? Like how are you growing like as people, as how do your employees feel? Do they long term, do they feel connected to the purpose?
Right.
It's a lot of times it's just the external markers of what is going to lead to the most profit. But if you take into account growing as a podcaster,
yes,
I need to know what I'm doing in terms of setting up an episode, preparing, researching. I'm speaking to a guest, whoever it is, or maybe I'm doing a solo podcast, and there is no element of zero sum where, because I am excelling at what I'm doing, or maybe I have a conversation where I felt like I completely flubbed it for whatever reason, that someone else necessarily isn't winning because I'm losing, and I'm not winning because someone else is losing. There's only this element of, I want to improve on what I've just done. But when you start to view it as a competition, like what I fall into sometimes, where I hear someone else's podcast or I see my numbers compared to someone else's numbers, and I think, okay, I'm more in that takedown mindset of, I'm on the mound, I'm pitching, I'm going to win because this other person is going to lose, and I'm going to fuck up their day, and I'm going to take their money, I'm going to take their title, I'm going to have bragging rights. That's when I start to, it gives you an energy, but it's the wrong type of energy, because then I become, instead of creating with any sort of originality and from an internal place of fulfillment, I don't feel fulfilled when I'm acting out of a state of, I need to be better than someone else's creation.
Yes.
And also takes away my own creativity, because then I'm just becoming alterations of someone else's podcast. If I'm using their creation as a baseline, and then I say, I need my baseline to be that 2.0, instead of just looking at my own baseline and saying, how can I create a better alteration of myself? So it's just this clusterfuck of staying in a competition mindset versus knowing when to release that. And I'm glad that I have that switch that I can enter a competitive mindset when I need to, when there are situations in my life where it is zero sum. Maybe someone's trying to take money from you or take your life, or like worst case scenario, something like that. Then it's like, all right, fucker, like I'm going to win. You're not going to win this one. But it took me a while to let go of that after I stopped playing, because my primary kind of, my default switch was zero sum. And that hurt me a lot.
Was the competitive drive. I like that you said like internal versus external growth too, right? Because if you're on that mound and you're just pitched a hell of a game and you tried your hardest and fuck, like it just didn't turn out and you get the L, right? Your external growth says, oh, your season just went downhill based on that performance, but you may have grown more from that loss than any win you could have ever recorded. Right. So I don't know that it's always inversely related, but it's interesting that that's the way. It's like people in a jiu-jitsu setting now that don't do competitive martial arts, by the way, will come up to you and say like, do you win? The first question they ask after your competition, you're like, nah, I lost, man. But that's all they give a fuck about is the fact that you won or lost. A person who's never been out there themselves they care about seeing your trajectory. Right? And that L, now the trajectory is going downhill, not the way that I saw him going up. But you're like, you don't get it, man. Like, this guy was like 4 years ahead of me, and I almost choked him unconscious, and I lost by 2 points. Like, there's minutia in that, right?
Yeah.
And I grew no matter what, so it's really weird how people about, like, because I had to rewrite this for myself. There's many fuels to fire that competition, that drive. And before, when I was not healed from my trauma, I would fuel that fire with rage and anger and everything that I wanted to write within my story. And then there was a period a couple of years ago when, man, I was just like, every day I had people come in and want to train with me. I had good training partners. My family loves me. I'm here. We're growing the micro farm, the homestead, and all this. And I'm looking around. I'm like, I don't have anything to be angry at. And then weeks and months went by like that, and I'm still training, but there's no fire in any of it. And I'm like, I know I love this, but why? Yeah. Why do I wake up some mornings like, I gotta go train? It's like, because I didn't retool the fuel that, and now I do it just like you say. I look at other people. I say, wow, that's fantastic mace work. Wow, that's a fantastic jab. Oh, that's a good round kick. But I'm only setting that as a metric for my progress. It's not that I want a round kick like him anymore. It's like, that's a metric. Oh, that's a goal now I can work on. If it gets 50% as good as that, my goal has been, I've been moving closer to my goal, right? But I'm not comparing my round kick to him. I'm not comparing my technique per se to this person in like following them on that creative journey, instead of being like, I see where his round kick's at. I need to work on mine. That's a metric, but that in reality, you always have strengths that person doesn't have, whether you post them or not, whether, in reality, we all can best someone else. Like, I'm sure I could beat Lomachenko at something in this world. It's not going to be boxing. You know what I mean? So, it's just,
if you catch him before he wakes up, you get a couple shots in and see where he's at,
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a good point. And you could even extend that to the business aspect of something like running a gym. If you're only focused on the small slice of what you're bringing in financially, which is what it's very hard not to focus on that as a business. If you are running everything where you feel like it's in a really good place, your students are fulfilled, listeners, audience is fulfilled for a podcast, you're putting out good episodes, everything is working, and then I look at what someone else is making for subscribers, and then my mind goes to fuck, like that is making me tight. It's like twisting the knife in me, because I'm hyper focused on this element of, I need to be in a certain position financially to be considered a good business, which is, it's weird because there's a lot of, quote unquote business minded people that are at the top of creative industries that don't really have a sense of any creativity. They're more coming in with money and then purchasing something like a podcast or funding a movie, something like that. And they'll try to make creative suggestions based on what's going to make more money.
It's almost like a quantitative thing.
Yeah.
Versus like, like they're actually pattern recognizing.
Yeah.
And saying like, oh, that creative idea is great because they see that as trending. Yeah. Not that because they're creative and they see the vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the money allows you to do cool things.
Yes.
But also when you hyper focus on it and you start to make creative decisions based on what is going to get the absolute last dime out of every decision that you make, there comes a point of diminishing returns, I believe, when the amount of extra money you may make from a decision may not outweigh the creative restrictions that you're imposing upon yourself or your listeners. It would be like if someone came in to this gym and said, here's your students are progressing at rates more rapidly than the other gyms around you. We love the setting. Everyone's happy, and you're like, great. And they're like, but we need you to sell all your equipment and replace it with something that's half the price, so your margins are higher. You'd be like, well, no, part of the reason why my students are so fulfilled is because we're using high quality equipment. We have pads that allow them to train daily because they're not taking as much damage. It's like when you just see everything as cost and profit, it can be a problem. And I feel like in the future, we'll need to move beyond capitalism 1.0 and get to, whether it's capitalism 2.0, whatever 2.0 is, something where the external growth and profit will be balanced out by the amount of fulfillment that you're bringing to your customers. It's not a dollar sign, but there's some measurable there to, okay, once you have enough per month to survive as a gym, survive as a podcast, then beyond that, what are the most important measurables besides just the profit?
Yep. And I think sometimes those things align, right? Like the need for whatever it is, the service, the product you're relaying to people, and then the money line. Like when there's a huge need for it, the money meshes with it, right? Yeah. But then people study that and they say, well, you did all these things, but the time was right, right? And then they want you to change a certain way to keep having that success, but that success is the money figure that they put on it. But it's like, well, yeah, that was successful in your eyes, but we're not going to go that way to keep making that tiered profit because we're leaving the group of people that I'm trying to serve or whatever it is, Like I've had people try to get me like to coach more high end folks. Like, why don't you just coach people that pay $200 a session and stuff like that for Mace and things like that? And it's like, well, because I don't want to serve them. I mean, I will serve those people and I would like to serve those people, but that's not the background I came from. Yeah. And I want to lift the position I came from up. That's that's the whole mentality of this place. I've never been the most like monetarily or financially focused person. But just in my experience, I left contracting where I was making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. I was completely unfulfilled. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic, and I was like crazy unhappy and suicidal and all that, but now I come to a place that's sustainable and I don't really have a lot of extra scratch a lot of times to make the moves I want to move and all that. But like you said, the people that come here I'm nourishing them. They feel purpose driven, and they're escalating somewhere in their lives, whether it's just their life or we have a few guys in here that are all in the competition circuit. So and they're raising the bar. Now, if that has to happen for a long time before I ever cut much of a profit, that's fine with me, because that's profit and stuff. I understand the need for it, the utility of having enough money to keep the lights on.
Yeah, keeping the lights on, yeah.
Exactly. But like just from the background I was raised in my experience, it's like that's not my number one metric. That's not the number one variable I'm paying attention to. The number one variable I'm paying attention to is well, it's a toss-up. It's probably half and half. It's community and it's healing. So I want people to come out of this with better than when they came in as a person, right? And I also want them to feel like they're part of something.
And that would make you a complete outcast psychopath if you were in, like if you approach someone like Facebook and you were going to buy Facebook in the early days as an angel investor, and Mark Zuckerberg was showing you all the numbers. This is how many subscribers we got. This is our projected growth. And you turned to Mark Zuckerberg and said, that's great. But like, how are you as a community? How are you healing your user base? He'd be like, who gives a fuck? Like, I don't want to speak for Mark Zuckerberg, but right. Like that would just be an absurd notion that you could come in as an investor and be worried about how your customers, how your audience is healing. It would be like, what? Like, we're making so much fucking money. Like, who gives a shit?
That's right.
It's like such an absurd concept.
We serve two different masters.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is absurd to a lot of people, man. But it's also kind of how this is the way it is, how you see like this business, this gym is attached to my house. It's it's like we live in that vein where like, okay, this is mine, and I'm going to do this here. And because of my background and the location where it's at, you're not going to tell me what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to do what I see.
Yeah.
And I don't have people in my ears saying like, that doesn't make any sense. You got to do this because we're not generating enough new subscriptions. We're not generating enough new revenue. It's like, okay, yeah, and a good time, man. Like maybe I'll get a money manager eventually, like it's probably a good idea.
Just someone to, here's the money, deal with it, do what you need to do, and I'll just worry about, doing what I need to do here at the gym. Just like having someone to like outsource the anxiety, the stress of having to worry about the money is someone who's good with it. That's always a good situation.
Like the data crunching too, and hey, when you would put this on, we got this many new people interested. Like that stuff's good to know too. So it's just I want to improve people's lives here. I want to improve it, and I'm only using the template that I used. So there's many more other ways. We all come from different backgrounds. I'm understanding your speech and competition through your long years of competitive baseball, and that makes sense to me. Even though I just played baseball for a small portion of my youth. Because it's just a competition, right? It's like there's a lot of different ways to do it. And that's kind of how I modeled this place too. Originally, I was like, okay, I want to have mace because I love the mace, but I'll also have the kettlebell. And I also had, before I had a squat rack, and I had other things. 'Cause I just wanted as many little attractants to get all the people that want to, like, oh, like if the mace doesn't speak to you, let's get you over here kicking this kick shield, like something in there will get you off the couch, moving your body and into that energy of movement and of self, like improvement and bettering your life, and all that is routes to discovery, right? Like, cause you could do like Muay Thai. I've seen people in the martial arts space. Maybe they do Muay Thai for like 3 months or a year or something like that, and then they get introed into jiu-jitsu, or they get introed into steel mace. And I've actually had people switch and never put on a pair of gloves again.
Wow.
And then I had some folks come in and really like the mace and train with the mace for a bit and still kept on with the mace, and they have a mace in their personal space and all that, but they're not into it like me. They'll pick it up, they'll do squats with it, they'll bang it on shit. But they won't necessarily like pick it up one day and be like, I want to create a symphony. I want today I feel beautiful. Today I feel like there's something coming out of me, and I want to make music with motion. I want to, that's a different person, and all I want is for people to stay in the energy. If they have to shift to mace, if they have to shift to Muay Thai, if I bring them up the road to Robert's place and we get them into jiu-jitsu, just staying in that community of, hey, we're constantly going to do hard shit. Where every day we're going to wake up and challenge our bodies and our minds, and every single day we're going to be getting that one rep in discipline. We're going to be getting that one rep in, I woke up today like not wanting to really be here, or not really want to put my shoes on, or just say fuck it and just sit around on the couch all day long, and you got there and you did your thing, and that is the road, man. That's the road to discovering your purpose here on life, what you're gonna do.
I think people have a medium that's an artistic canvas medium. Everyone has that path, and it's different from person to person. So for me, it used to be pitching, the art of throwing. Everyone has that artistic medium, the art of throwing. Now it's become the art of conversation. And for me, the mace and Muay Thai and jiu-jitsu, while those things are still very important, mace and Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, that road is ahead of me. I have a feeling that it's going to be very important to me. But those things that are more in line with movement are things that I enjoy doing, even if the art of it is not consuming me like the fire. Like you are consumed by the fire of the art of movement. For me, I feel like I'm consumed by the fire of the art of conversation at this segment of my life. And it's important to find that canvas medium where you can paint with brushstrokes what this is going to be. How are you going to learn this art? It's going to be a lifelong journey, and you sink your hooks into it. And then alongside that, the thing that keeps me sane with that main medium is having the things that I do 2 to 3 days a week that get me outside of my head. Like when I go to a Muay Thai session, when I'm swinging the mace, swinging a kettlebell, going, just doing something to get out of that space that sure may not be the thing that takes up my primary artistic engine. Yeah. It's also supplemental to the things that I do. I've been swinging the mace where I just have to stop and go write something down for a podcast idea because I'm just doing a 360 and all of a sudden I'm like, fuck, it's something about the upcoming guest this week just popped into my head when I'm moving around, not thinking of anything, stretching out in the morning. I'll get a lot of ideas when I'm just moving around where it's not to the point where my brain can't work anymore. It's not a very intense session, but it's something that's in the space of mobility and movement where I can breathe and have ideas come to me. Yeah. There are conversations that I know would not have happened the way that they happened if I wasn't doing things in the space of movement to spark those ideas. So for me, I have that one artistic main medium. I suspect most people do, if not all people. And then you have others who have space for 2, 3, 4 of those main artistic paths, which I can't even fathom. Like I feel filled up by the art of conversation. When you have someone, that like Lex Friedman is a podcaster that I admire, that, he is an MIT scientist that studies artificial intelligence, and he's also one of the biggest podcasters in the world, and he's shreds on guitar, and he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Just does all of these things. And when I frame that as a competition mindset, I used to think, how is he putting out 3 episodes a week and had time to become a black belt and is also an AI researcher at MIT? And when I started to accept myself that, he is a special person, that the way he is built, he may have room for multiple canvases that he can express 100%. As of now, I'm a person that has that canvas space filled up by the art of conversation and the other things that supplement it. So that's been a big part of my journey too, is learning myself and learning what I have space for and accepting that and not becoming frustrated or angry with that.
Yeah, that was beautifully spoken, Zach. Like artistic, how did you put that? Artistic
canvas, artistic medium. Yeah.
That's it, man. And you ever defrag a computer? I don't know if people do that anymore, but you used
my older brother did. He actually put together my first computer.
Okay, like the PCs back in, I don't know, the 2000s or something like that. Like there was modes where you could defrag the hard drive, right? Like, so you're always doing shit on it and you're always creating fractals with all these programs. You're doing all this. And that's what it feels like to me, man. Like when at a very basic degree, if you found a movement medium that maybe wasn't your artistic language like you're speaking of, but it's something that you're like, man, I could see myself going down the journey of white belt, blue belt, purple belt, brown belt, black belt, right? I can see myself progressing with the mace to a point that I can, like for me, when I first picked up the mace, I couldn't do anything I wanted to do with it. Nothing. Like I saw something in my head and I couldn't do that. And I'm like, okay, the skill set has not been acquired. So I need to build these skills until I can paint the picture for others to see and for me to see that tells my story the way I see it. But then you have to catch that skill up. You have to catch those skills up, right? And I think from a basic degree, the mace is definitely part of my artistic language. But outside that, if the mace spoke with me, if I could see me in a journey with the mace, if I could see me in a journey in a gi, then at a basic rate, that's your hard drive defrag. And like you're saying, when you pick that implement up, when you get into a jiu-jitsu class, it might not be the best jiu-jitsu you have ever done, but you just defragged your hard drive and all of a sudden you have all these ideas or you have these clarities and these problems in life, because it is a form of meditation. It's not like the pure no mind meditation or open mind, but it's like a focused meditation where nothing else gets in. And I think, and I don't know the science route around this, but when you're doing something like that, 360 swings is a perfect example. When you're 360 degree swing with your mace around your body, you're hyper focused on your structure after you've learned that. You're hyper focused on not allowing collision to happen on your body, right? Because you are swinging a bludgeon instrument, right? Yeah. You're hyper focused on all these things that you've been coached through or you coached yourself through. And at the end of that road of the training session, you realize, oh, my subconscious or something has been happening behind the scenes as I'm not in there actually interpreting things and doing stuff, like, you know what I mean? So it definitely provides such a beautiful reset and a space to examine your daily life afterwards. You're like, boom, epiphanies, write it down, journal,
100%. So to go back to your artistic medium of movement, I wanted to end off with talking about an aspect of that with the street fights in Thailand.
Oh yeah.
The movement and the craziness that we were talking about last night a little bit.
Sure.
That fired me up, and that was exciting to hear about and to see you talk about the passion with which you speak about that. So I wanted to open the floor to you to talk about if there was an experience in particular. I know we mentioned a couple of different ones last night, but something that sticks out with the street fights that you've experienced in Thailand and how that was involved in your way of thinking about movement and martial arts violence, like as a part of that journey, to zoom back in on that time and talk about what stands out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll put a little caveat in there. Like, it was wrapped around my life in that era, that time frame, right? Like, so I joined the Army at 17 years old, and I was off to actually do Army things when I was 18. I had to graduate high school first, and then I exited the Army at 22. And like 6 months later, I was into contracting, So I tried a little bit of school with the GI Bill money after that. So I tried to be like a quote unquote normal person after. But in that era of I got out in 2005. So, which is interesting enough, is one of the only years I didn't deploy overseas in that whole stretch of the GWAT, Global War on Terrorism. I deployed 03, 04, missed 05, 06, 7, 8, 9, missed 10. 11, 12, 13, 14. I was deployed all those years. So I missed 2 years in there, like completely, where I didn't deploy at all in those 2 years times. In 2010, I was living in Thailand full time as a crazy person, training Muay Thai and getting in street fights and doing copious amounts of drugs and alcohol and just terrible decisions.
Embracing the chaos, embracing the craziness. Yes.
And like, that's the way it ran, man. Like, so when I went over to Thailand for the first time in 07, and that was like, it was after a very hard deployment. The deployment was one you can read about in international news these days, or at least that's what it became back then. It's history now, so I can speak a little bit more about it. But I was involved in the whole Nisour Square incident that those guys brought up on charges. They weren't the guys that were actually charged with crimes weren't on my team. They were on my sister team, and I was on the other team, which we were right up in it as well.
Could you summarize that briefly? Because I'm actually not familiar with the specifics of it.
That was the one where, so from an insider perspective, I'll tell you the international story version first. Okay, the international story version, or at least the broad strokes, was a bunch of contractors went into a traffic circle and shot a bunch of unarmed civilians, and that's how it went. And those unarmed civilians kind of like rose up and caused an issue there, and then the rest is kind of like international court news and all that. And 4 guys eventually got charged and did prison time. They actually just recently did a podcast with what's the gentleman's name? He runs the podcast Vigilant Elite. And he's an ex-Navy SEAL, CIA contractor, and he has a lot of guys from like our walk of life, like SEALs, special operations.
I'm not sure, but I'll make a note to check it out. Vigilant Elite.
Yeah, he just popped up like a year or two ago, and his podcast just took off.
Wow.
And he just interviews formerly professional guys, or that might still be in the lifestyle, and asks them like about these things that we read about over the last 20 years of war, right? And so this incident was in September of 2007, okay? And from an insider perspective, the way it looked like for me on that day was we were staged at a checkpoint, which was kind of per the usual. And oftentimes we would parallel teams. We were a proactive response team. We were a quick reactionary force. So we responded to any incidents around the Baghdad AO that involved allied assets. So it could be, we rescued a Polish ambassador once, pretty much anyone that worked for the quote unquote good guys, right? Yeah. We know how that story has played out over the years, right? So, that was our charge. And we were standing by it at a checkpoint when one of our teams that was on venue, now this is a high threat protection team. They run around with the Suburbans and the lights, right? And they escort dignitaries and diplomats to meetings and these things in a high threat environment, right? So these people were on venue with a senior aide to Condoleezza Rice, okay? And that venue was attacked with a VBID, so a vehicular explosive device, and it was rather a large one. And they couldn't quite get through the entrance. They got a little bit past the checkpoint, and they realized they weren't going to get any farther, and they clacked it off. And so the whole checkpoint was eradicated. A lot of the entry and gate guards were killed. It was like just under probably like 1,000 pounds, I think, or something like that. So that's a lot in a vehicle.
And this was the checkpoint outside the venue where Condoleezza Rice's senior aide was inside at the time. So they're trying to get as close as possible to that building.
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. And what happened on venue was there was just minor injuries. Our team was all fine. There was cuts and bruises and stuff. She was showered in glass and like had minor cuts and scrapes and stuff like that. But as soon as that incident happened, we get the call, like, go out, And we're not driving Suburbans. We're driving massive armored vehicles with 2 crew-served machine guns in 2 turrets on each vehicle. So we have like a 4-vehicle motorcade. That's 8 crew-serves on 4 trucks,
Jeez.
And then guys inside, and like usually a designated defensive marksman team. That was my job, like a counter snipers.
Yeah. So you're rolling in hard as fuck. Everything.
We're the fucking sledgehammer. You know what I mean? Until like RPGs and mortars and things come out that could kind of neutralize that. But and that shit did happen. But on that day, so we roll out to the intersection that or through the intersection that the entire incident happened. But her venue or their venue was, I don't know, maybe like a half mile past that. So we roll in to get them. We got them out. We enveloped them in our motorcade. As we're peeling back towards the green zone, that's where we're stationed out of, and that's where we lived and ran almost all ops out of. We were head back to the green zone. We let their motorcade go back in the gate as we peeled off again, because as we were coming up on that ramp, basically inbound into the green zone, we got the call that another team had come out, because we work in tandem with other teams too, right? Another team had went into the intersection and just started receiving fire, and they lost the truck, so their truck went down. And so we're like, fuck, they're in it. We need to go rescue them off the X now and recover their vehicle, right? So we go drop the motorcade off with the principal and everybody else that was involved on the actual VBIN incident. We peel off to go back into the intersection we just cleared on the way to her. And as we're coming into it, we don't get the call that they self-recovered the vehicle and leave.
So the other team had already left, and that would have been important information.
But we didn't get that call.
Okay.
But before they left, there was like a massive firefight, right? Like they received fire, their vehicles down, they're returning fire, their bodies, there's hooked vehicles, there's burning shit. And we roll into this apocalypse scene. Like, where the fuck are they?
Yeah.
And our vehicles are the same makeup as their vehicles.
So they think the same guys are back. And I just want to pause you for a sec. So the guys that are firing against you? Is this a terrorist group? Is this civilians that picked up weapons, or a combination? Like,
it's a gray area.
A gray area. Okay.
Yeah. It was definitely right next to an Iraqi army barracks.
Okay.
So there was at least like a battalion of Iraqi army soldiers that were directly next to the intersection. Okay. And they all joined the situation.
Okay.
But a lot of the people, some of the people that were killed were civilians in the intersection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was civilian deaths. I don't exactly know how that went. I wasn't there during that incident. Mm-hmm. But as we rolled in, we're trying to like mediate with these people and like, hey, what's going on? Where's our team? What's going on with you guys? Why are these people, you know? And they're starting to chant and go crazy, right? And there's hundreds of people and they're starting to box us all in, right? And all that. So that was the scene of me leaving for Thailand. Like they locked me down in my room for like a week as they investigated this and shit. And then like after a week of that, I was like, I'm fucking out of here.
And internationally, that got painted with the very broad brushstrokes of, you know, contractors killed civilians or something like that.
Well, they started approaching it. I mean, they literally, from my perspective and how I studied it way back then, and I'm a little out of school on the whole incident now, except my vantage point from it. But it's like they started to prosecute it as some sort of a criminal thing in a normal place. But it's hard to do that because it's like even our ROEs were different. It's like if somebody cuts your motorcade in half, you have the right to shoot them. They don't have to go boom.
It's a direct threat to their life and safety. Yeah,
that was motorcade ops back then. It was like kill or be killed kind of shit. And like the one day they penetrate your motorcade and it's a feeler, then the next day you're glued to a dashboard, melted, you know, and that's just how it went. And then they put that through the lens of like, oh, well, why is this happening? Why are you guys shooting this, that, and the other? And so it was also, I do think it was very politically charged back then too. You know, this is 2007. This is right after the, well, it was like, is that before or after? Yeah, that was right after the Battle of Baghdad. And so they're trying to like, you know, there was a lot of political meandering up in that scene. But I left Iraq off contract right after that, and I moved to Thailand for the first time. So, you know, I wanted to tell that story, just caveating it, all the chaos that I was involved in, right?
Yeah, like, you go from this just completely balls to the wall, chaotic mindset. You're coming off, you know, an insane firefight situation, and then you're coming into Thailand as kind of like a reprieve from those elements. Just be like, let me get the fuck away from there and go here for a period of time.
It took years to defrag my hard drive. Me and my buddy would call it ceiling fright, where I would wake up most mornings, almost every morning for years and years and years, and I had no idea where I was. And sometimes this would last for like, you know, the typical period was like 30 seconds to like 4 minutes or 2, 3, 4 minutes. But it's lasted before like 10, 15 minutes. I'd be walking around like a place I lived or staying or a hotel, and I have no fucking idea where I am. I don't know what country I'm in. I'm like looking for clues, like some sort of amnesiac, you know?
And that could be you waking up in a place you've been staying at for 6 months. You wake up and you're like, where the fuck am I right now?
It was such a trip, man. Because we would deploy on schedules of 3 months to 2 months to sometimes 35 days working or 6 months on. And then you go on leave for 2 weeks or a month. And it was literally like, I'm in this intersection 1 minute, and we're firing, we're shooting guns, we're defending for our life and all this stuff. And then like within 36 hours, I'm like in a go-go bar in somewhere in like, you know, like Chiang Mai or in Jomtien or something like that. And
your brain has to comprehend all of that. And you're going into a dream state, regaining consciousness. I can only imagine what it's like to have all those different elements of psychologic chaos and physical chaos and
It was
violence and, you know, being in life-threatening situations on a regular basis to where you're desensitized, and then you get all of that taken away from you.
Yeah.
I imagine there's, you know, you'll get into it, but just being in that space and just being like, fuck, like, where did all this stimulation go? Like, this is insane.
And it was a very professional lifestyle, like on the job. So, like I drank in the early days of my contracting career, but then I realized quick that like, that's probably not the recipe for success for me. Like, 'cause I had a drinking problem as well. So I had eventually kicked that out of my professionalism. So I would not drink on contract. So for like 2, 3, 4 months or whatever the contract entailed for that stint, I wouldn't drink. And then the gloves come off because I'm going on leave, right? And that was the energy we were in, right? Like,
then
so
the battle of the bottle.
Yeah, and it's like this violence, bro.
Yeah.
It's just like constantly violence and constantly professionalism and surviving and all this, and then you're free and you're like a chimp out of a cage, you know, like you're like an angry chimpanzee, and now we were in Thailand. The group of guys I was with most often, we were genuinely like good-hearted people, and we like to have fun and just relax and stuff like that. But we were also coming from a place where like once you cross that line, like we're happy to cross that line with you, and it's, you know, we're gonna fucking take care of it. You know what I mean? So maybe sometimes, well, not maybe, definitely sometimes we were a little too quick to cross that line. Where when I worked in the bar later on as like a bouncer in security, I was, you know, I realized the route to success was like de-escalation, no matter how close we thought we were to that line. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, man, like we can figure this out a different way. That was not my time in Thailand, you know? So it's like we'd work out, we'd train, we'd party, and like it's patio. Like it's a fucking circus to begin with, and like there's just so many opportunities to just fucking whoop people and get into situations and shit like that, you know. So yeah, so you want a funny a Thai story. So like there's I didn't tell you this last night, but so we were out at a disco. The same disco, actually, it's, if for all you who have ever been to Pattaya, Thailand, it's a Marine One. Shout out to Marine One. It's a disco.
Shout out.
It's an old school disco from like I think they opened in the 80s, bro. So they've been around forever.
So they have the disco in their veins.
Yeah,
and they've been kicking for a while.
That's it, man. And they had that escalator scene where one of my crews there reached across and pulled that Brit across from going down into the up lane. Yeah. And just beat his ass.
Yeah, you said you were with a friend who ended up being in the Thai mafia, and you had some, you know, you made friends with some people in that space, and they provided, you know, a path where they needed to sometimes. It included grabbing someone and throwing them over an escalator. That's awesome.
Exactly. And so we were in that same disco one night, and this one buddy of ours, he was more of an acquaintance, not like a close friend we always hang out with, but he's a Marine sniper, or ex at this point, former Marine sniper, and also working the contracting gig. And he was just partying and just hanging out with this girl, and you know, sometimes there's lady drama there, you know what I mean, because girls will hang out with some dude, and then as soon as that dude is off going to do his thing, she's
that's cross-cultural drama.
That just doesn't happen in Thailand.
Yeah.
So that issue was happening, and then the dude comes back in, right, and sees, quote unquote, his girl with this buddy of ours, right, comes over and just starts putting the whoop on him, right, and starts hitting him, you know. And so that whole situation got figured out. Our buddy went to the hospital and got all stitched up and everything like that. And we weren't done with it, though, you know, yet. So we're like, what the fuck happened? And you know, they're explaining it all to us. And you know, the same guy that did the escalator scene, the connected Thai mafia Muay Thai crew that would escort me around to gyms and shit.
There you go.
That guy, we call him up. We're like, all right, we need you to find some people for us. And so he finds him, the dude that like kicked my buddy's ass in Marine One that night, you know, or last night, literally as it is. And so I get the call early the next morning. It was like 6 or 7 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like not wanting to be up, right? Like, what the fuck? But it's my buddy, and he's like, hey, we found him. You gotta get down to this street, right? I'm like, and I hear the street. He just tells me, right? And it's on a soy between First and Second Road. I'm like, that's the fucking police station. And he's like, yeah, come down here right now. I'm like, why the fuck would we go to the police station? So, dude, I have Silkies shorts on. I have Silkies. I put my flip flops on real quick, and I throw like a tank top on, and I'm fucking out the door of my hotel.
Good
right?
Clothing mobility for fighting.
That's
just
it,
like
dude.
those silk shorts and that tank top. You can move however you want.
Literally just like the Marine PT uniform. You know?
Yeah.
It's like just Silkies and
There you go.
So I'm going down to this police station, and what it turns out is they got picked up for, I don't know that they got picked up for the fight, or that they may have, but they got picked up for something else. And it was the guy who was involved in it, his buddy, and they were in the police station still getting signed out from their little stint, right? And I show up down there, and Art's already waiting there, the Thai guy. And so is a couple of our other buddies. They're already waiting there, you know, and I show up, and Art's like, yeah, he's in there, right? I'm like, dude, we're in the fucking parking lot of this police station. You can't be pointing at it. Like, and this is early on, before I understood the relationships, you know, that he has with certain authoritarian entities there. Right?
Yeah, some crossover between the authorities and the mafioso authorities.
That's
some
it,
interchanging,
man. Yeah. And man, we just waited there. I mean, we probably waited for another half an hour or something. They finally released them. And as they released them, they're coming to that police station. We're fucking chasing them to beat their ass. We're chasing down the street like whooping them. The police just don't give a fuck. And I'm like, they're not going to chase us, you know?
Was it because Art was there with you guys that they were kind of hands off? They're like, oh, that's a dude that we don't want to fuck with.
That's
you can just have your way with our buddy. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want.
That was one of like the scenes that I started. That was like the eye opener. I'm like, oh, okay. He has a relationship with these people. Maybe they're related or whatever's going on. But yeah, that's slowly, or maybe not so slowly, over the course of the years, was more revealed to me as he just kind of went everywhere where he wanted, and he wasn't in like a overly, he's like the most jolly guy. Art was. He was like a super friendly guy until you fucked around.
You need to get down to business,
and then you find out. You know, it was wild, man.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of scenes like that. There was a lot of instances like that, and you know, it's like one of the running rules was you don't ever get involved. You don't ever get involved in Thai affairs. Right. So if there's like a Thai affair, we would let Art handle it. Just like, you know, de-escalate it, or he might get into a problem with some Thai guy or something like that. We never involved ourselves with that. But if there was ever a Falang problem, a foreigner problem, that's where we invite ourselves in.
Yeah. And I'm just imagining someone trying to start a fight with you guys, and you know what it's like to be in a firefight with people trying to fucking literally kill you, shooting all around you. You know, anything from weapons to hand-to-hand combat is in play, explosive, all of these things. And you're used to analyzing all these different elements. And then some guy is in your face trying to fight you. And you're like, whew, like, I just have to worry about this right now. Like, this is almost like a meditation to me, like destroying a guy just like hand to hand, you know. I'm used to dealing with all these different stressors around me. But that guy's, you know, he might be thinking, oh, like, I'm going to intimidate this dude. And you just flew in from somewhere in the Middle East, and you're just like, dude, like, I'm on vacation right now. Like, I'll beat the fuck out of you and like go have a fucking Muay Thai. Like, I don't give a shit.
It's true, man. And like, and to be honest, it's literally like it was addicting in the wrong ways, right? It's like the relationships you have with certain people that you know aren't going to go anywhere, and then you're like, oh, why do I still keep doing this? And you're like, because it feels good from a pleasure sense, but you know, like, it's not fulfilling, right? Like, because that's exactly right. We would come back from Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever guys were contracting from, and we kind of all just meet up, and whenever we were there, and as we met up, it was just like, okay, we came from way up here, like way the pinnacle of violence, and dealing with that and managing it and mitigating like attacks and stress and returning fire and all this, and now we're here where people want to play violence, but I mean, that was almost like, that's an illusion as well, because even like a street fight, like I might have survived all that war and contact and all that stuff, but in a street fight, you just never know when that guy's gonna start unfolding the knife, and you think you're just gonna have a little back and forth with the guy, and next thing you know, you're wearing a knife in your rib cage. That's not good. Like that could be the end.
Yeah.
Like
there's a documentary that I've been meaning to check out. I believe it's called One Punch. I might be getting the title wrong, but the premise is that there are a bunch of people who are interviewed about an incident that they've been a part of where they've either seen someone throw one punch or have thrown one punch themselves, and that one punch led to someone dying.
Whoa.
Just in a street fight. And it was in most places, in most situations, based on just the trailer that I've seen, it seems like it's, something escalates.
Yep.
There's one punch thrown, and then someone's head bounces off concrete or something, or like bounces off the edge of the sidewalk, and how that person's a murderer for throwing one punch, and it changes your entire fucking life because, like, taking just the emotional trauma of taking someone's life, the legal prosecution, the financial burden of that. It's just like you never know, even if there are no weapons involved. You might throw a punch, someone's off balance, and they like crack their head on a construction site pipe or something, or like a shard of glass, or like you just never know. So I can't imagine like, being in a place where you were in Thailand where that stuff is happening so freely and seeing it and knowing in the back of your mind the most like extreme form of violence that you've been a part of. I could see how the more, playful forms of violence to you can seem less consequential, but then out of nowhere, like maybe you punch a dude and you're like, fuck, did I like kill him? Like I've done this 20 times before. Like, why is this guy not getting up? You like have no idea.
That's the perspective right there too, because like in hindsight or just in current, like, right now, the here and now, that's how I see it. I see it as like, I hate violence. It's the absolute last course to resolve anything, and sometimes it's necessary. Right. So like, but I see it absolutely like that. But back then, I had the illusion that there was some sort of, and I guess it is an illusion because, like you said, one punch can result in manslaughter, and can result in death. It can result in maiming, whole lives changing, right? But it is also way down the scale than from what I was experienced and experiencing, right? Like crew-served weapons and people bounding with RPGs and F-16s flying overhead when that all gets too intense, to drop ordnance that was made out in the Midwest. Right. Like there's scales and levels to this shit. Right. And I think that's the problem is like I was so desensitized. Like I was used to just people every single day of my life trying to kill me. Just murder was the template. You know what I mean? And like, so you just look like, this guy's gonna fucking try to punch me in the face. It's hilarious. I'm gonna walk up and I think I'm gonna take one just to see how it feels. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I can smile through like, a bloody nose and bloody lips and just start beating his face in. It's just like a crazy, like thinking about it now, it's fucking crazy. Yeah. But back then it was just, it was trauma. It was desensitization. It was just like, where I was in life. It's like every day is just is that day. That's it. There is no tomorrow. We're just going to live this day and then we'll move on if we make it. It's weird and it's wild.
How did you get to the place where you are right now, where you're running a great gym, you have a family, and you also have that feeling that amount of stimulation is enough, that's fulfilling? Like, when did that switch flip where you went from, looking like you're walking down the street and some guy punches you in the face, that's like, an invite to the start of a fun day. Yeah. When did it become enough for you to live more of the lifestyle that you're living right now?
I would say, well, if I could pick two spots in the timeline, I would. The first spot would be rock bottom. And I redefined rock bottom a lot of times. I thought I had hit my rock bottom several times. And I was like, well, this is rock bottom. I'm going to change from here. And I think maybe even that's natural. Like you start to change, but nobody's perfect, right? And you don't run into complete success. So I hit rock bottom, and then I redefined rock bottom. But the true rock bottom was like, I was like down and out, man. I was in the Philippines. This is after I moved away from Thailand. I lived there for like probably almost 7 years or something in the area of that. And then I lived in the Philippines directly after for 2 years. And I was also taking contracts in the Philippines, but I was working a little less. And I was just like suicidal. I was trying to turn my life around. I was like exercising more. I was getting back into training because I had like a little break in there between moving from Thailand and finding different abilities to train, different gym and things like that to work out in and do stuff in the Philippines. And I was like, all right, I'm starting to do the right thing. I'm starting to put things together, but I was like suicidal. I was just not in a good place. Every day I would just fantasize about like, all right, what's the way I'm going to do this? You know, how am I going to do this? You know, take my life or just not be here anymore. And I saw myself as like, I was sick a lot because I was drunk. You know, I was in and out of the hospital sometimes even. And I was starting to run out of money. So when I finally hit rock bottom and decided like I could go back to America, I kept trying to move my location and think that my problems weren't going to chase me, right? And we talked about this a little last night, and I was like, you know, I had to solve the problems before I could solve like build something in a space, right? And so I moved back to America in like the beginning of 2015, and that was truly like the rock bottom. There was like so many rock bottoms that like amassed together to finally like change my tune. And the mindset then, bro, this is how like far back I was. The mindset then was, well, I have become this thing. I saw myself as a good person. I still this day, I believe I lived through a good moral compass, even if somebody were to live through my perspective and see my life through their eyes in my shoes. They would still think that I never really crossed those moral lines that I had set for myself. You treat people with respect and kindness. You do things and try to have the best outcome until that's not possible. You know, like I always tried to live within the framework my mother gave me, but at this stage I had realized like I'm no longer that. Like maybe I wasn't outright like stealing money from people or hitting people or trying to abuse people or anything like that. But the nihilism that I had fallen to, the drunkenness, the, you know, running out on promises, you know how there's like that subtle side of the guy who's never fulfilling his promises or doing the things he says he's going to do. And he's always leeching, and he's always somehow like his energy is a pariah now.
Yeah. It's like a false hope that keeps that person around you.
Yeah.
The promise of a future change, but in the present moment, there's, you know, they're like an energy vampire. Financial vampire, just sucking on you, and it takes a while to realize. Yeah,
and I was that, and I'd realized that, and it finally was like straight in my face, and I was completely honest about it, and right there, and I was like, well, I know I have to stop drinking, and then I have to start doing these things, but just one thing at a time. And the whole mentality and the mindset back then was, I'm a net negative. If I were to die today, which I had already thought at this time, I was 32 years old. I had already like written the check that I was going to die before 30. Like that was, and then once I made it past 30, I was like, well, what the fuck do I do now? Like my whole game plan was to die already.
So you were genuinely thinking during your time in battle that you were going to die for 100%. Sure before you're 30.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like I in the Army alone, I think we ran over 200 combat missions, like just in my 13 months that I deployed for my first deployment ever.
Yeah.
And then past that, I mean, I worked 6 days a week as a contractor for all those years. So I don't know how many combat missions I ran, thousands, you know. And
is there an average lifespan for contractors? Like in the NFL, for instance, the average life of a running back is 2.5 years, something close to that. Do they tell you going into it that if you work this amount of missions, you know, the average lifespan of a guy is like 4 years or 7 years or something like that? Or you just knew from stories and experiences that I'm going at this rate, there's a good chance that I'm dead before 30?
Well, I would definitely have to look into that, but the arm isn't, you know, these are all people that are extremely close to me that died in, over there, you know, and it's like, and this side too. It's.
And for people just listening, Adam is showing me tattoos of names on his arm of people that passed away that I'm assuming you were in combat with. And...
Yep. Well, not when they passed. In these circumstances, he died in a helicopter crash. He died in a suicide bombing. He died in a helicopter crash that was a result of direct gunfire. And it's just, in those that time period too of like 03, 04, if you even want to involve the early Afghanistan, which I wasn't part of. I was in Afghanistan later as a contractor. But like 01 till about 07, 08, that was not, those were not years where you there was a lot of death. There was a lot of loss. You know, so I just figured, and especially with like how it was turning out, like I had buddies of mine and things that worked in the same exact mission set, same job description, same areas of operation, and they didn't see 1/50th of what I saw. And I don't know what that is still to this day. I don't get it. I don't know why I was picked, even though I had the intention and energy for that. I wanted that, you know. I picked certain job sets because I wanted to blow shit up. So there is definitely intention in all that too, right? Like we were talking about the energy. You want to find something, you're going to find it. So I don't know exactly like the lifespan, but it you know, it was one of the top dangerous jobs I know at one point in time, you know. And so yeah, man, it was just it was a wild ride. Where were we going after that? Sorry, I got lost in.
We were talking about when you came back to America.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
and getting to that place where you felt like you were a net negative.
Net negative.
And then coming back to America.
Yeah, so my entire goal then was to rewrite being a net negative. So when I came back to America, my entire goal until I died, like, which I thought might even be soon, because I was not like you see me now, right? It's like those years from the time I was 18 until now 32, I had basically built myself up, but then I started degenerating through that, right? I was still working out. I was doing the right things as when I could, but it only lasts so long. You know what I mean? As you're feeding your body drugs, as you're feeding your body terrible sleep, as you're a stress monkey. I mean, all of it, you know, and I was seriously deteriorated by the time I got back to America, you know, like I couldn't fight my way out of a wet paper bag, bro. Like I was a fucking shit show. And like I literally said, you want to know what? If I only do one thing before I die, I'm going to become neutral. I'm going to become a 0 on the scale where nobody relies on me, but maybe nobody at the end of the day goes, oh, what is Adam doing? Is he going to be all right? You know, or do I need to bail him out tomorrow? Do I need to help him out? You know, do something. So that was the line to get the thing kicked off. And it's just my attitude and the way I was built, like, you know, by the grace of God. When I flip my mindset, I mean, I've quit a lot of drugs in my life, and every single time I've tried titrating and cutting down before, it doesn't work for me. Every single time I have to get to the line and say, fuck it, I'm done. And people will look at me in the eyes and say, like, you could kill yourself. You know, like, I don't give a fuck. This is the way I'm going.
Yeah, like smoking 2 cartons of cigarettes the night that you quit, and you're just like balls to the wall.
Yes.
I get that. I get that.
And then done. Yeah. And then absolutely done. And that's what I was. And I had stopped, and the first thing, and it's hilarious. I'm gonna make a gospel comparison to the New Testament here, and it's to Paul, Saint Paul, who starts off. If you've ever heard the metaphorical armors of God against the enemy, it's in the book of Ephesians, and he starts with "Gird your loins with the belt of truth," and that's where I started. I said, from here on out, I'm never gonna lie. I'm only going to tell the truth about everything. And I don't care, because ingrained in me working through the government and all that. You have to lie. Lying is built into it. Lying to protect your life, lying to like manage things and try to like, you know, moderate things to your benefit, you know, and these things, you know, I mean, like lies are built into the examinations. It's wild. So I said, no more lying. I'm only going to be honest. And that's really what got my life turned around, being completely honest with first myself. And then once you're honest with yourself, you start to say like, no, Adam, you were in shape. You're not in shape anymore. Adam, you were in the army. You're not a soldier anymore. You know, and like I start rewriting that story. And then being honest like that and starting a progression of positive habits, rewriting the negative ones and trying to deal with those, because some of them had physical addiction symptoms. Some of them had psychological addiction symptoms. Like alcohol was very both physically and psychologically addictive. Some of the uppers that I would take before, like meth and Adderall and all that stuff, I was never physically addicted to them. But the psychological addiction, I would dream of them in my sleep. It was weird.
Like the crutch to function on it.
Yeah. And so rewriting all that and being honest and being back in America and able to do something with my life, that ran the course of over a year. And then I was, you know, again, blessed, absolutely blessed to meet Kate and, you know, our son Maxwell now. I'm not his biological father, but I've been in his life since he was 1. And that meeting Maxwell and meeting Kate, that was the second point on that timeline.
Yeah.
That was the higher purpose where I didn't have the best view of myself anymore. And I was just like, you want to know what, no matter what I do, I'm just going to try to rewrite the wrongs until I'm out of here. And then when I finally saw them and I saw that there was actually a future, like I didn't know that. Like I had to relearn that you could actually live a life that isn't constantly terrible, you know? And like once I started rewriting that, I saw the trajectory of a child. I saw the trajectory of people paying attention to me. And I'm like, what kind of, do I want to leave a legacy of being the old person for these people, or do I want to set them up for success? So that was really the second part of that, man. It was, and ever since I've just, you know, it hasn't been perfect. I've had a lot of missteps and everything, just like anybody. But I just refused to quit. You know, and I refuse to go. I mean, that, to be honest, my entire life, the experiences, the fights in Thailand, the wars and the contracting gigs and the trauma from the trailer park and all that shit, all of that was experience I learned from. And I realized that's not the way. And that's like the best thing that I got out of all of that is like I had hundreds of thousands of dollars and it's all gone from those days. And I was unhappy. So to be honest, like that showed me that money isn't happiness. I've had, I came from poverty. I've had not riches, but I've been somewhat wealthy to be a single man with no attachments, no kids, no nothing, you know,
especially living in that part of the planet too,
exactly where it goes a long way.
Is so much lower.
Yeah. You know? And so that really showed me like, okay, you can have all the things that people build up as status symbols and you could be an absolute rock bottom. And then you could be at a place where like, wow, I put my shoes on today and I didn't get drunk last night and I went to the gym and I came home and I hugged my family. And it's like, and that is the higher height than you've ever been at in all the clubs and the VIP seating and the bottle service and the fucking illusion that people rest their success tales in. It's so weird, but that was it, man. It was just like literally, I mean, I don't think it was to be honest, I don't know that I did anything in it other than not want to give up and eventually not decide to keep doing the same shit that got me in the hole.
That's beautiful.
You know,
thank you for sharing that.
I think it's grace, man. It's absolutely grace. I was chosen to be here.
Yeah.
You know?
I wasn't planning on getting into this, but I wanted to ask your thoughts as we end off, because you mentioned that you were in Afghanistan in the later portion of the U.S.'s time there. And since the last time we've spoken, America has pulled out of Afghanistan. And with the way that everything happened with pulling out of Kabul and the things that are portrayed in the media, and you know, there's a lot of narratives that are being told to craft a certain view, and a lot of things that are not being said that may not make it in. Having been out of that situation now for over a decade, but seeing what's happening on TV and seeing the way that we pulled out, do you have any thoughts on the way that we came out of Afghanistan? Was there anything running through you when you first saw the images from the airport and people dying and the soldiers going in to evacuate? What was running through you when you first encountered that reality?
It was confirming what I have come to believe, or what I've come to see things now as. It's not my first time of even seeing it. Like in 2012, I was there. I was there in Basra, Iraq on a contract when the U.S. government left Iraq. And they left in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to anyone else. I knew they were leaving, and some other people knew they were leaving soon. I didn't know exactly when, but they were starting to stage their trucks. They were starting to do weird shit that you don't normally see them do. And I was like, yeah, they're out of here soon. And they left in the middle of the night. The U.S. Army left Basra, Iraq, and they left the rest of their places too, all coordinated. And a funny story from that little era. Yeah. That's 2012 in Basra. As they left, and we're watching them leave post for the last time, and literally that army had a cordoned security perimeter that shrunk immediately to what we had. And so instantaneously, the whole base became from what it was originally to a quarter the size. So now the walls.
So you just became a bullseye, essentially, with the army leaving.
And the crazy thing is like, we're armed. We have trucks. We have stuff like that. I mean, we don't have the U.S. big army stuff, but we went out to raid shit they left behind. They just up and left. Like whole hospitals, whole med stations, whole gyms, equipment till you can't see. You know what I mean? To the horizon.
Just ghosted.
Yeah. And we're running through the med stations, and there's people in there. There's Iraqis in there. And I'm drawing my pistol and shit on people that I have no idea what this guy is running out with bottles of medicine and shit. And this is real shit. I was taking LCD screen TVs for my chew. I was taking shit off the wall. We're loading the trucks up with shit.
Fuck it if they're leaving it all behind.
Oh, dude, it was a fire sale.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that happened in 2012, and that was not nearly widely as publicized because it was more of I guess they got their way more. They got their exit strategy more synchronized or ironed out in that situation.
Yeah, or it didn't fit the narrative that the U.S. Army wanted to portray on TV if they didn't want that publicized for whatever reason.
And I saw them do that before, and then so when I saw that come out in the news and that was all happening, and I was just kind of shook my head, and I'm like, man, isn't this how we do it? And it's so terrible because I absolutely don't see eye to eye with the way America handles their foreign policy and what we do to countries and what this is. This is all coming out in the wash now, and, I was sold the lie just like a lot of people, I think. And, it's not to say we're not supposed to be anywhere. We shouldn't be in certain places, right? It's not like a blanket statement, but how we treated that is completely fucked up. It's completely fucked up. And, even the way we treated those 13, or I guess one sailor, right? 12 Marines and one sailor that died in the explosion over there during the pullout, the way we fucking treated them as a country or as a political class and everything. We weren't allowed to air their deaths. They didn't even hit the mainstream media because they didn't want to publicize that negative, so it could be spin positively. And I'm not going to disclose all that I know. There's some intense shit going on right now. And I have at least one person that I used to be extremely close with that I still have some distant ties to right now. And there's things going on right now in Kabul that aren't making the news.
I'm sure that, and it's when it comes out of the news crazy. And there's radio silence, that's a lot of times that's a sign of shit's fucked up there. And we want to leave on the note of the U.S. made the right decision by pulling out, and then we're just not going to report what's going on in that area anymore. And it's like the news is so quick nowadays with the cycle that it's just on to the next thing, on to the next country, on to the next event.
I mean, has there been in recent memory any case that I think that has been so silhouetted, so highlighted, of how we squander our nation's wealth and give away our riches and resources?
Yeah.
And at the expense of an entire civilization, another civilization. You know what I mean? I might not see eye to eye how the Afghanis handle their stuff or do their thing, but that's them, and I'm not, who am I to judge them?
That goes back with your mentality in Thailand, that if there's a conflict between Thais, they have their own culture, they have their own way of handling it out, and we can step in if need be, but we'll let them figure it out. Speaking of net negatives, I'm not an expert by any means on U.S. Afghani relations, but just based on what I've seen and based on what's come out, it seems like there's no question that America was a gigantic net negative on Afghanistan and its people based on what we did there.
Yeah, we tried to instill in them our belief of nationalism.
Yeah,
like there's some sort of national entity. The West formed Afghanistan's borders. Those aren't there. They didn't form those.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, they didn't form those. They're so tribal over there that they couldn't fucking tell you. Now it's kind of leaked in after 20 something years of war. But like, even now, you'll take a guy from this side of a ridgeline, this guy from this side of the ridgeline. If they hate each other, they hate each other. It's not like here where we're all New Yorkers, and we can do our thing. And even people from New Jersey, we understand, it's like that's a massive piece of landmass that they don't have. They're so fragmented and local and tribal that they have all these ethnic sects and all these things. They don't see the country of Afghanistan. That's why any attempt to make a national army in that country was terrible, because they would all join the national army with their own prerogatives from their tribe. So as soon as they could instill those, or as soon as they could exploit the next tribe in their own unit, they would. And I mean, how many green on blue incidents do we have over there where an Afghani shot another person, another Afghani or an American or many Americans, that was so widespread. It was crazy, so it was all just came from our belief of how we can instill like the way we run shit, the way we do things. I don't even think from the top level they believe that. Or if they do, then that kind of shows how disillusioned they are with reality as a political class, as like a ruling class, like it's not good how we handle affairs. In Afghanistan, I mean, look what's going on right now in across the ocean and with the Ukraine-Russia thing. I mean, it's like we're so far up shit creek without a paddle, in my opinion, with how we've handled these situations, that we need to bring it back and have some sort of semblance of, who knows? I don't know if you need to go back to George Washington's isolationism, but we're too big for that maybe, but we definitely need to get out of trying to take a whole culture over and be like, you guys are now American democracy.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, that's it. It hurt me too a little bit. Seeing Afghanistan handled like that, but it wasn't a surprise. So I don't think it hurt me that much. I know a lot of veterans were affected because they saw their hard work, their maybe people they lost, their buddies for no reason, or this, that, and the other. But I mean, most of my experience came from Iraq, and Iraq was no picture of success either. Iraq is still probably worse now than it was before, so.
Well, I'm so grateful that with everything that you've been through with violence and combat and the good and the bad, relationships, building a family, I'm so grateful that you've been able to channel it into your own artistic medium of movement and martial arts, and creating the Ludus Combat Club, Northeastern Primal Life, putting on a weekend like we did this weekend with Steel Mace Flow, cold hot therapy, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu. If you are listening to this podcast and you aren't fired up to train with Adam or follow Adam, check out what he's doing online, then you must have had a massive heart attack midway through the podcast and be dead, because this is why I enjoy following along from you from Brooklyn, 6.5 hours away.
Yeah.
Coming up, where can people follow you? Where can people check out what you're putting out content wise and philosophy wise? And then also to even come for the second annual Champions Fighting Weekend, because it was a kick-ass weekend, and I drove up 6 hours from Brooklyn, and I feel like I got more than fulfilled by what went on this weekend. So if you're within that distance, you're not going to regret coming up. So where can people follow you for events like that and content?
Sure, man. That's music to my ears. I'm so glad you had a good time.
Yeah,
because that's what it's all about. And you can follow us. Our YouTube channel is getting bigger and bigger. So the Ludus Combat Club on YouTube. I try to keep that channel up to date. You can see us roll on that channel. You can see our weekly open mats. You can see some of our fighters here as they've grown over the years, pad work. We're putting some competition footage up there as well. So the Ludus Combat Club on YouTube. You can go to our website, northeasternprimallife.com, and that's where you can find the schedule and how to get a hold of me or what we're into and how to get in here. If you're interested in jiu-jitsu up in the Plattsburgh, Clinton County area of New York, anywhere up here in the Northeast, Robert Hugus, BrazilianJiu-Jitsu.com, all right, or RobertHugasBJJ.com. Okay, and that's he's my jiu-jitsu teacher, 5th degree black belt under Julio Fernandez, who's a Carlson Gracie black belt original. So that's how you can get a hold of us, man. And before we end this, I got a little gift for you, bro.
Oh,
so that's for you, man. And
amazing.
I hope that supports you on your journey of learning the grappling arts, my friend.
Thank you so much. I was admiring your shorts yesterday. Adam handed me a pair of Ludus Combat Northeastern Primal Life training shorts, and I'm definitely gonna take the first opportunity to put these on my ass and go train and sweat and bleed a little bit and feel these out. I'm gonna have to send you some AUXORO merch as well, and I'll send you a few of the shirts I'm wearing right now, and we're putting out some gear on the website too. So
cool.
I really appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Absolutely, brother.
This weekend was awesome.
Those are really good for no gi too. So those are some good no gi shorts.
Perfect.
Yeah, man. No pockets. Nothing to get your fingers snagged in and shit like that.
Perfect.
But brother, it's been such an honor, hosting you this weekend and having you here. And it means a lot to me that you came by and spent some time with my family too. And it's just so cool to get to train with you after that first knife session went so well, and we maintained in contact. And now after growing after this weekend, thanks so much for your interest and your friendship and just being a part of our tribe.
Yeah, thank you. I love you, brother, and thank you again for this weekend. This was awesome.
Absolutely, man.